It's a giant blob of goo. Quote me on that. All right.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Hahn,
Ernest Blind, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Richard Fox and Josh Hayes. Well, hello everybody. It's the final week of 2017, and we have had a tremendous amount of shows this year with some tremendous guests, and I hope you've really enjoyed it. I do hope that you'll tune in 2018 as the show continues to climb and go to new heights. I would like to thank our sponsors who so faithfully support the show each week. Richard Gleaves, as you know, we have an audio clip at the end of each show by Richard Gleaves. Thank you. Nick Breaker, his new Essence series, first book Septima is out. I highly recommend you go pick it up. Daniel Arthur Smith and Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, Samuel Peralta and the Future Chronicles, Terry R. Hill. Thank you all for sponsoring the show. I really appreciate it. Because it is a season of giving, I hope that you'll join me in helping out a family that desperately needs our help right now. In the show notes, you'll see a place where you can help baby Evie. She and her mom and siblings were in a head-on collision, and we've got a place where you can help this young family and do something nice for them at Christmas. Thanks for listening in. On to our show. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to bring you two of my favorite writers on this next to the last episode of the year. Richard Fox and Josh Hayes, both no strangers to the show, and they're doing something really cool now. They have a new collaboration called the Terra Nova Chronicles. The first book, Terra Nova, is out. This thing is exceptional. I know you guys are going to love it, and I wanted to have Richard and Josh come on and talk about collaboration and what it means and what is special about this series that they're doing. Richard and Josh, welcome to the show.
Hank, always a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very excited to be back. Thanks for the invite.
Excellent. I'm glad to have you guys. Richard, since last we talked, you took the award for Best Military Sci-Fi at DragonCon this year, and things seem to be going well. What's up with you here lately?
Yeah, after Iron Dragoons it has come out, the third book in that series came out as well, and it has done very well. And then Terra Nova, for the first book of the Terra Nova Chronicles, came out late in November, and has garnered good reviews. And we are well on our way to the second book in the series.
That's awesome. Josh, what's happening with you? I know Keystroke Medium is burning up the airwaves, as always, and you are cranking out some new work this year. What's up with you lately?
Well, let's see. I finished the third book in my Second Star Chronicle, Shadows of Neverland. It got off to a slow start, but it picked up some reviews, and it still sells some. I've got my page reads are actually going up tremendously compared to what they have been at. And then, of course, I've got finished Terra Nova 2 months ago, and then I just today passed the 21,000 word mark in book 2, and we should have that done by mid-January.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Are you finished with the Second Star series?
It's got one more book. I originally planned it as 5, but those were 5 novellas, and it didn't work out that way in the writing, and we talked about that a little bit before. And but the third book kind of brings everything to a head, and then the fourth book will be the final confrontation and wrapping all the plot lines and and the story up. So I we'll see how this year goes. I've got basically 3 3/4 books left to write in Terra Nova's series, and then I have another project that I'm halfway finished on that'll be due in May, and hope to finish my Edge of Valor project this summer, and maybe I can tackle book 4 there after the summer.
Well, Richard is, with his Ember War saga and that whole series has really established himself as a leading voice in military sci-fi. Josh, do you consider yourself a military sci-fi writer?
Well, yeah, I would say yes. However, the second star is not technically military science fiction, and I felt like when I got into indie publishing with my friend Scott Moon, who you've had on the show, and we host Keystroke Medium together.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, some weird bald guy.
Watch it. Tread softly.
Right. When I first started getting into indie publishing, I'd been writing for many, many, many years, and I'd always written military science fiction. And in my head, I had this big, huge, sweeping, epic military science fiction series that I wanted to write, but I didn't think that I was ready. I didn't feel like I had the chops. That it was just a huge project that I was in my head thinking it's never going to get written. It's just going to keep there in the background. So I'll just do something else, right? And that way I can't fail at it, right? So I brainstormed Second Star, and it is not. There is a military character in it, and they do battle and do things like that, but it's not strictly speaking military science fiction. But in my heart, I believe that I am. Edge of Valor is my own creation, and that is 100% military science fiction. With the presentation's different, but I think people will like it. But I really enjoy the Terra Nova stuff because it kind of, as a writer, it kind of fills the gap and the bridge between where Second Star is not military science fiction and Edge of Valor is. Terra Nova is not, strictly speaking, military science fiction. Again, there's a military unit in it, but we're more into the kind of galactic empire exploration mystery type story. And so it's bridging kind of the gap for me to get back into the strict military science fiction.
Well, this is really interesting to me because I got that feeling that this was something different than standard pew-pew military sci-fi. And, it has a bit of a Star Trek kind of feel, but the Galactic Empire stuff that you talked about, but it's this kind of space exploration kind of feel to it. And Richard, I know that you started writing like thrillers and mystery before switching over to military sci-fi, and I feel like you're kind of dipping your toe into some of those previous work that you did there as well. This really feels like a mashup of kind of all the stuff that you guys are doing right now. Where did the idea for Terra Nova come from? Who had it first, and how did you guys connect on it?
Right. With Terra Nova, I planted the seeds for that series deep into the Ember War saga. And if you get into like book, I think it's 4 or 5, Terra Nova first gets mentioned in a 9-book series. And at the end of the 9-book series, we learn that Ken Hale, one of the main characters in Terra Nova, is taking his colonization fleet to Terra Nova. So what Terra Nova was originally, as far as the writer's perspective, it was a trapdoor. Is like after the Ember War was over at 9 books, if I went and did this other thing that didn't work, well, I had already planted the seeds, and readers were already interested in Terra Nova, so that I could, Iron Dragoons, no one wants that. Hey, Terra Nova, and so I can keep eating because I sell give people books they really want to read. So Terra Nova was set up as to be an expansion or spinoff way in advance, just because I knew it would be an interesting kind of thing to do. And it's more, excuse me, if you look at Star Trek, almost everyone in Star Trek is military. I mean, they're in Starfleet. They have ranks, little pips on their things, and they all call each other by their rank. But the call of Star Trek military science fiction is incorrect. It's much more space exploration, boldly going where no one has gone before. And Terra Nova, it goes along those similar lines. There's military people doing military things, but them fighting a war is not the whole story. The story about Terra Nova is people finding a home and protecting their home. And that's the overarching arc of Terra Nova is this space exploration, colonization. And, there's going to be aspects with the politics, and there's going to be the military, and there's going to be, the action, and there's going to be some of the more, interesting humor that I have fun with when I write these books. So it's for everyone who's read the Ember Wars, and I say, here's Terra Nova, it's not a hard transition just because it's not, constant battles. Rather, it is these characters that you get to know and characters you already know put in different situations. So, this new series, it goes down a slightly different path than Iron Dragoons, which has lots of, giant robots breaking things. And it's more that space exploration kind of story to it. And, thus far, I have not had any complaints. People saying we want more, shooting. So, for which I'm glad.
Awesome. So how did you guys come together to do this as a collaboration? Right.
Well, with Terra Nova, I had that idea, long ago when I was writing the Ember Wars, and then I get into writing my Albion Lost series. I'm writing Iron Dragoons, and I realized that I have to get these titles out pretty regularly, and by the time I can come back to Terra Nova, my readers would be like, Terra where and who? So I realized I had the chance, right away when, the idea of Terra Nova is still fresh because people are still reading the Ember Wars, they're still getting through book 9. And there's still that question of, well, what happened on Terra Nova? My readers still have that question. So I thought to myself, okay, I can tell this story with the help of someone who's incredibly talented and I know can do it, or wait for years and come back when the story is cold and no one will care. So I said, okay, who do I know that's very talented, knows the Ember War, and it can get this done? And Josh Tays, came to mind immediately, and Scott Moon came to mind immediately for another series I wanted to do. And then I called Scott and said, "Hey, how about this?" And he said yes.
So Josh, what was your reaction?
Well, I'll tell you what's crazy about this whole setup is that Richard and Scott and we met by chance, right? Because we had just started Keystroke Medium, the show, and we had no idea what we were doing at all, Scott and I. And so we just would hook up like once a week and blather endlessly. And we had Ralph Kern and a couple guests on. And then I remember specifically the day, I don't remember the date, but I remember the day that I found the Ember War. And I had just finished an audiobook, and I was looking for something that would give me a military, like kind of Space Marine action story, right? So I went on Amazon or Audible or whatever it was, I can't remember, and I was looking through covers and looking through titles and kind of reading little descriptions, and I'm like, nope. And then I got to the Ember War, and at that time, I don't know what book you were on. I think you maybe were on 6 or 7. Maybe it was even 5 or 6. But the Publishers Pack 1 and 2 had been done by Podium, and then book 3 was out too. And I was like, oh, Publishers Pack. Now I'll give it a shot. Dropped a credit on it and listened to the entire thing probably in 2 days. I was out doing yard work. I had it in my headphones. Completely loved it. Loved the characters, loved that it was a true military science fiction genre. And I told Scott, I said, you need to listen to this book, and also we need to get him on the show. So we got him on the show. He was very gracious, great guest. And we were excited because we were like, man, we had this great author on the show and whatever, right? Well, then he comes and we become friends and chat back and forth. And then he comes to us in January of 17, and he says, "Hey, you guys want to write some Ember War books?" And we're like, "Yeah, I got to check my schedule. I got to, I don't know if I got all this. We got so much stuff going on. Yes, we'd love to do that." And then it was just, if you could write in the Ember War series, what would you write? And he had these ideas that he wanted to do. Terra Nova was the top of his list. We talked about it at length on the phone about what he wanted to do with the series, and I thought that it was something that I would be really excited about doing, because, and this is what really struck me about when Richard came to me with the collaboration idea. The first thing he said to me was, "I don't want you to write this just because you have to write it. I want you to be excited to write it. I want it to be your story. I want it to be something where you can say, I get to go and write on the story today." And as we talked about it, I became more and more excited about the idea. And so it took us a lot to get started. The learning curve, I think, between Richard and I, and even Richard and Scott, it took a long time to find where we were at and where we were comfortable with. And then once we found that, it was phenomenal. It's been a great journey.
So did you say that you guys started talking about this last January?
Yeah, that was it took way too long, and that's my fault. And what it was is like, how do I had never collaborated with anyone on anything ever before, and that was I've never done that before, and they're, hey, learning curve, oh boy. So, and it was like, okay, how do we work this out? We're like, okay, this is what the story is, and what it ended up being was, okay, we agreed on these are all the big beats for the story, and then it's like, okay, this is where it's going in this first book. Here's where it's going for the next book 2, 3, 4, etc. And then it was a little back and forth, like, okay, this is what the characters, this is their background. This is what they all want. And then what ended up happening is, after way too long, I gave Josh a 15,000 word, I think it was, outline.
Yep.
And I said, here, just you write the rest. And like, here's 15,000 words of the whole thing. And then Josh wrote, and then he wrote everything else in there. And he came back to me like, what about this, that, and the other thing? Like, those are good ideas. Do that. And then he gave it back to me. And then I said, okay. And then I went back through, and there's a couple times, as I'm looking at the story, I'm like, okay, we need to shrink this part, we need to add this part. And at one point, I said, Josh, you need to write this battle scene on the ground. And he wrote 6,000 great words. And then I was reading it, I'm like, we don't need all this. And then I said, because I messed up, and I was like, we don't know these characters, and like we're asking readers to suddenly get invested with characters they've never encountered before. Halfway through the book, so I was like, okay, we're going to chop this down to 2,000 words. My bad. And
so hold on before you continue on. I want to touch on that specific instance, because publishing with Richard is it's like very stressful, and I say this because Richard has his publishing, like he has it down to a science, like to the second he knows what's going to happen, right? Well, so I'm the type of person that when I finish a draft, it's done for like 3 weeks before I publish it, right? So I'm like just sitting there waiting. Well, we're on the countdown, and we're like in the last, when did you call him? Probably a week and a half, maybe even less than that, when he sends me a message and he goes, "We need a battle scene on the surface of the planet." And I go, I don't have any characters. I don't have anybody who's down there. And I go, how long do you want this to be? And he goes, between 4 and 6,000 words. And we're within a week and a half of publishing. Like, we put this date out there, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. So I smashed it out and got it to him. And he did cut out a lot of words, but it actually made it better in the long run. But it was one of those nail biting things where you're coming down to the wire and you're like, oh wait, we need to do this.
I know what you're talking about. It's like that all the time for
me. So one of the biggest hurdles to get over was just learning how to work with another writer and understanding each other's process and how each one of you approach the creative process.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, let's contrast with book 2, Bloodlines.
Yep.
Is that so? We get done with book 1, and then immediately, we go into the creative process for book 2. And I said, okay, here's what I want, and then like over the course of like maybe hour and a half, 2 hour phone call, Josh and I plotted the whole thing out.
Yep.
And then I wrote a mere 5,000 word outline, and Josh was like, yeah, I got it. Boom, and he's tearing through it.
Yeah.
And so I think we've cracked the code to a much better extent now. So instead of months of me going, it's now one phone call, here you go, and he's off and running. And then he'll give that back to me, and I'll fox it up, and then it'll go back out.
So the blood lost on book 1 pays off in book 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's much easier to, plot out a book on the phone when you're exchanging ideas than it is like trying to do it over Facebook Messenger, because you get 50 messages in when you're having a really good conversation, and you have to go back and find out what were we talking about back there. But when you're talking on the phone 2 hours and you can iron everything out, it worked really well.
Well, and another thing that's lost on internet chat is getting the tone in someone's voice and inflection and knowing when to pick up that, okay, we're on to something here. Yeah. You lose all that nuance in just typing messages back and forth. And there's something about a verbal conversation that you feed off of each other. The creativity seems to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because I remember when we were talking about things for book 1, that I had no idea were even in his mind. And so I was trying to, while I was doing the writing of the outline, I'd get to a point in the outline where I'm like, I don't know how he's seeing this. So I need to figure out what he's seeing. And so we'd have to spend, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes talking back and forth, trying to figure that out. Well, in book 2, during that whole conversation, we talked about like, this is what things look like. This is what they're doing over here. So now when I sit down and look at the outline, I can kind of recall that conversation and remember, oh yeah, this is what he talked about here, and this is what he meant here. I'm really intrigued by it. I actually like book 2 a lot better than book 1. I think it's going to be super fun for people to read, because there's a lot of cool things that happen in book 2 that, and even compared to the Ember Wars, where the Ember War is just a straight, military sci-fi battle to save humanity. Well, we're going out and learning all these different things. These different alien races that are out here, and we get to do a lot of cool things with that. And I kind of like that aspect of this series.
Josh, you talked earlier about how that Richard has his process down to the second, and he's publishing, quickly, and he's, bringing books out for the audience that's waiting for them. And Richard, you talked about, needing to strike while the iron was hot, and people, are expecting these quick releases and not, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea that just because Richard is publishing fast, he is not, publishing subpar work. These books are excellent, and everyone in the series has been. But Josh, we talked about your second Star series and that you've taken some time publishing that. Contrasted with Richard, who is publishing, he's got a 9-book series out, and then, the spin-offs and all of that. Josh, from your perspective, how has being under, this shortened, kind of crunch for time, how has that changed your writing? And, do you think that it's good for you? Has it challenged you? And, kind of, what do you think about that?
Okay, so yes, it has been challenging. It has been a phenomenal experience, and it's forced me to definitely grow as a writer. So with Second Star, and I don't want to get too much into it, but with Second Star, my idea was kind of like the Hugh Howey, Michael Bunker process. We'll write a 25,000 word novella. We'll do 5 parts. We'll publish it as a whole novel after the fact, right? I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So book 1 was 24,000 words. Book 2 was 40,000 words, and book 3 was 65,000 words. So absolutely no idea of the process. I was not a planner at that time, so I did not have the series at all planned out at all. And now I am a very, very strict outliner. I'm a very staunch planner, and that works a lot with Richard because Richard is very much that way as well. And so when we sit down to do these plans, we're right on the same page now, because I can sit down with his outline, and now even with one of my outlines, if I'm outlining, because on this other project I'm working, I basically took Richard's method and used it for another project just for me. And I took 2 or 3 days to write an outline and beats. It's slightly different, but pretty much exactly what he does. And I was able to get through 31,000 words in that project while we were doing edits for Terra Nova. And now that book's on hold while I'm writing Terra Nova 2, Bloodlines. But my anticipation is that because of my speed increase, the way that I write off these outlines, that when Bloodlines goes, when I finish the draft, I send it to Richard, and there's probably going to be a shorter span, but I would imagine 1 to 2 weeks where he's processing it, he's getting it edited. We've got to do another meeting for book 3 and figure out where we're going for book 3. But in that 2 or 3 week period there, I think that I'll be able to knock out and finish the rest of the other project book that I'm working on, just because I know exactly what's going on with it. And so I know that there are a lot of people that hate outlining, and I get it, but it streamlines the process so much better, because the outline is basically a discovery writing, right? And that's fun, and we can discovery write and we can have the outline down. But then when you sit down to write, I have all my discovery writing notes all ready to go, and all I have to do is add color and flavor and smells and all that stuff to it.
Richard, you wrote a 15,000 word outline for the first Terra Nova. Do you always write that detailed of an outline?
No, normally it'll go between like 7,000 and 10,000 words for most any book. But for that one, for Josh, like I was putting in specific lines of dialogue for how I wanted, like there were some scenes I wanted, like you have to hit the note just like this. And like there's one scene which is a comedy scene where there's like a bunch of these haha jokes for the name of a ship. And it was like, and like I knew exactly how all those jokes would land. And so when I gave that to Josh and he gave it back to me, like I'm going to do this just how I like it. And so there was a lot of, I putting the pieces just right for Josh is like how I wanted it. And I thought that would, in doing that, it made the next go through easier for me. So when I went through okay, no, like when I was going back through the draft, I'm like, I need to add this, take this out. And so it worked pretty well.
We have a lot of friends that are writing in this space. I think everyone has kind of sat up and taken notice this year of Nick Cole and Jason Anspach. Dear sweet friends of mine, and of you guys too, I know, that are just absolutely killing it, with Galaxy's Edge. You, Richard, with the series that you're doing, just absolutely killing it in the space. I know, Chris Fox has as well. Do you feel like that there's something special, about this kind of, this corner, of the Amazon store, that is especially suited, for these kinds of books and for publishing, often and quickly, and can this be replicated to other genres, or is it something special to science fiction and kind of military sci-fi specifically?
It's, I would say with Nick Cole and what I'm trying to do, and I think with a lot of other people, is that versus the larger, traditional publishing aspect. When I sat down with the Ember War, my first thought is this is a Michael Bay movie with marginally better dialogue. is what I was going with the Ember War. And the entire point of what I was trying to do with the Ember War was to entertain. I wanted, hello, reader, sit down, have a good time. 3 hours of something other than your Facebook feed for you to enjoy a night. And so every time I sit down to write, I think I'm doing this to entertain. And I think with a lot of what happens too often with big publishers is that they're not writing to entertain, they're writing to influence, which is a different kind of writing.
Yes.
So when people...
that's an upcoming question.
Yeah. So when people pick up a Richard Fox, Nick Cole, Josh Hayes, Scott Moon, etc. book, they're like, oh, entertainment, finally. And I get so many reviews, like people are like, I can't believe, this is what they've been looking for so long. It's pure entertainment. Now I will work in some message, a little bit, but I disguise it as part of the entertainment. And so anyone can do that, and it's possible, for whatever genre is out there, to just, hey, let me just tell a good story right now, and if people can focus on doing that, readers really appreciate it. Okay, hello, boys. Say hello to me. Hello, this is Gordon. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, go say hi to mommy, please. Sorry about that. So, back to entertaining. Yeah, so if the goal is to entertain, you can do that in any genre. And, give readers out there a break from here's your entertainment with a side of Tinder hair. That's not Tinder, Tumblr hair. There we go. Give your readers a break. Just let them have some fun, for goodness sake. So anyone can do that.
I this past year especially, I've made a lot of friends in the traditional publishing zone, as well as the ton of friends that I have in indie publishing. And I've had some interesting conversations, shall we say, with some traditional publishing folks. If I were writing straight sci-fi right now, I don't think there's any way you could make me publish traditionally. I don't see that that side of publishing is having any impact, with rare exceptions. James S.A. Corey, maybe, some of those guys. But indie publishing is just absolutely killing it right now. And I wonder, and you touched on this a second ago, Richard. I was talking with a multi-decade science fiction veteran the other day, and his show's going to air in a couple weeks, and he was talking about the role of science fiction writers is to challenge people and to paint a vision of the future. And that writers who write for entertainment only are not doing the greater population any good in the long run. And, of course I had to call him, call bullcrap on that. But what do you think about those old ideas, that every story needs to be elevating the conversation and stretching us to think a particular way and that sort of thing, as opposed to just entertainment? Like you said, what is wrong with entertainment?
Well, I don't think anything's wrong with entertainment. I mean, the reason people read fiction is to escape, the stress in their life. So, and when the thing is, we've come to the point now where the idea of let's push the conversation to new areas, and right now it's getting pushed into really weird, let's just call it deviant areas. Okay, you're going too far, is what's happening with a lot of this fiction, and I think there's a good backlash now, because I remember Stranger in a Strange Land, Robert Heinlein, kind of big deal for hippies, right? And and boy, look how that ended. We got bell bottoms and flowers, okay, and. So now, if you're trying to push the conversation to a whole new area, you're getting into a whole weird area. And for us, for science fiction writers, it's almost counterculture now to say, hey, let's talk about traditional ideas. Clutch the pearls. It's like, what if we had a book about duty and honor and family, and oh my gosh, here come the Twitter mobs. And so we were kind of, I dare say, is the pendulum swinging back a little bit? It could be, but as far as writing to entertain, my readers appreciate it, and I've gotten emails from people saying, "Well, thank you for not including all this crazy stuff that other people put into it." I'm like, yeah, I don't even want to do that, because the plan is someday my kids will read this, and then I don't want to have to explain that scene to my child. So.
Oh man, yeah, I totally get it. That it's just, you ought to, if you want to read stuff like that makes you think in completely off the wall ways, more power to you. And there's plenty of stuff out there to read to scratch that itch for you. But you ought also to just be able to pick up a book to just have some fun. And I just don't think there's anything wrong with that. Josh, what do you think about that? Do you have any ideas or opinions about, having to have a message versus just entertaining the reader?
I think that depending on the reader, all books have messages. But then depending on the reader, all books might not have messages. And some authors purposely put them in there. Some authors start out with an idea or an agenda, and then that's where the story comes from. So you get more of a message than you do a story. And this actually came to mind. I just finished reading Brandon Sanderson's Oathbringer, and this massive book, 470,000 words, 1,200 some odd pages. I listened to it on Audible, so it was 56 hours long. Listening to it, and there's several themes that are explored in this book. But one of the things that stood out to me on this book was, and he didn't harp on it, and this was a conversation that two of the characters were having to justify, are we going to attack or are we not going to attack, right? And so, not to give any spoilers away, but there was kind of a moral dilemma on, are we really the bad guys or are we the good guys? And who was here first, basically, right? So I read that as, oh, I like that a lot, because that kind of speaks to a lot of what we're dealing with today in American society, with just as a specific point of reference, the Thanksgiving Day holiday, where there is you have a lot of people who celebrate Thanksgiving as this is the Pilgrims and the Indians coming together and thanking God for surviving through the winter and providing and all that. And then you have another group who I also believe is accurate in their thoughts and feelings, is that's the Native Americans who basically are saying we took their land from them, which I think in effect a lot of that happened. But nowadays, I mean, we're how many hundreds of years after this fact, and we can't do anything about that, right? So, are we still the bad people for still being here, or has it now changed? And so, while Sanderson didn't really attack that as this is something that I want to preach about, he put it in there as like a nugget of, let's think about it for a minute. And I like those in fiction. I don't like to be preached at in fiction, where the author is telling the reader, this is how you must interpret what is happening around you, because everything has a different interpretation depending on who you are, right? So I think that messages in fiction can be good. It also can be bad, but I think if you just start, like Richard's saying, if you're just writing a book to entertain, just entertain the person. If a theme or a message comes out in the telling of the story, then it comes out naturally, and don't force that into the narrative.
Sanderson is one of those interesting guys that, in his personal life, he's a Mormon, and he's a by all accounts, very devout Mormon. He posts on Facebook all the time when he's traveling, asking, where the local church is and stuff like that for him to attend. And when he was on my show, I asked him, kind of about how his faith plays into his ideas about writing and storytelling, stuff like that, because I'd never heard anybody ask him stuff like that. But people don't really pile on him for his, very traditional views, in real life. And I wonder if that's because he doesn't just bleed it on the page in his stories. He, I think he approaches it like you said, here's an idea. Let's think about this. We can let our characters talk about it and kind of, see where one person comes to one view, one person comes to another, and then, just kind of see how it plays out. And I think readers appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's much better to pose the question to the reader, and then, if your characters in the story have different viewpoints to talk about it, it helps the reader to go through the end, figure out their own answer. And people much more prefer that instead of this is, the finger wagging. You can get that in books. And no one likes to have a finger wagged at them or a finger wagged at them.
Yeah, from either side. I don't want either side wagging their finger at me, Right. But right before we started recording, we were talking about the new Star Wars movie and kind of talking about how the series, a lot of fans feel like it's gone off the rails. And Richard, you touched on this a minute ago about stories. What's wrong with having some traditional themes like duty and honor and doing the right thing and family and things like that. And you come down to starting to talk about things like good versus evil, and is there actual evil, or is everything just really gray and we're all a little good, we're all a little evil, and maybe we all have dad issues and that's the reason we do stuff.
Let me chime in about the Last Jedi. And when you start with Star Wars, to say it's a good versus evil story is so basic. It's not even, it's not up for debate. We know what side Darth Vader was on. We know what side the Empire is on. We know what side the Rebels are on. It's easy. It's an easy clash. This is all the storytelling. We get to The Last Jedi, and all of a sudden, the good people are kind of bad, and the bad people, well, they kind of want to be good. And it's this whole wishy-wash of no one takes a side. Everyone is gray, and it ends up with you get a giant blob of goo. Is what the movie amounts to. It's a giant blob of goo. Quote me on that. All right. And so when it's time to look at, is this a good movie? No, it's goo. All right. And, for the people who really enjoy, let's have a good versus evil story. Let's, Star Wars, which we kind of expect to go into a Star Wars movie. And we need to have a shout out to Nick Cole, because he called this long ago, saying that the Star Wars movies are going to go away from good light side versus dark side to it's all just a muddle. And he called that many months ago. And Nick Cole, you were spot on. Spoilers for everyone who hasn't seen The Force Awakens yet. So,
well, the other thing that you want to talk about in Star Wars is that the characters, right? Because the things that made the original Star Wars some of the greatest science fiction movies ever are Han Solo and Chewbacca and Princess Leia and Luke and Darth Vader, right? So everybody knows those characters. I don't know who Finn is. I don't know who Rey is. Like, I'm not emotionally invested in these characters because when I sit down and I watch the movies, I feel like we don't get enough of them. And I feel like there's so much going on in the movie, and they try to make it this big epic thing that you don't get enough of the characters. And I wonder if that takes away from me wanting to root for these characters, because they, like, you learn, you follow Luke on this journey, and you meet Han, and you're like, I like Han. He's a great character. And in the new movies, you're following Finn, who he doesn't have any idea what he wants to do at all. You follow Rey, who also has no idea what she wants to do. She thinks she does, but she really doesn't. You have the fighter pilot that just thinks he's God's gift to fighter pilots, and even he doesn't know what he's doing, except that he knows that he wants to fight battles. And then you have your bad guy, Kylo. He doesn't know what he's doing. So you have all these characters that don't have any idea what their goals are, what they want, other than the rebellion has to succeed, right? So it's hard for me to empathize with these characters and like them the way that I like the original ones.
Well, that brings me around to, as writers, how do you build characters that have clear motivations? Like in the original Star Wars, Richard, you hit on it. You knew who those characters were. We knew that Leia was duty and honor bound. We knew that Luke was altruistic and he, was ready to join up. You know that Han is roguish, but with a good heart. You know that he's looking out for number one, but when his friends are in trouble, he's going to be there for them. And you know that Chewie is going to be beside Han's side no matter what. These characters have clear motivations. When you're writing characters, how do you ensure that the reader is going to care about them and that they're going to join up with these characters on their mission?
Well, before you even start writing the words, you know who the characters are. Well, because I'm a big plotter, and I know. I'll know beforehand what do these characters want. And, with Terra Nova, you have Ken Hale, who's the director, and it boils down to him is he wants to see his brother again. He missed out on his chance, and through crazy science fiction, he saw his brother die back during the Ember War. I can't explain it right now. But so Ken Hale wants to find his brother Jared. And then and then we get one of the other major characters, Kit Carson, and during the story you learn that in her past she screwed up royally and got people killed, and she's trying to redeem herself and do much better. And then so it's easy. It's easy to start with this, but then how you execute it is involves some skill. So just knowing beforehand, and it doesn't take much for the character to realize, for readers to go and, this character is really all about this. That's it. That's all you have to do. And then you can have other motivations come up along the way. And, for during the Ember War, I had these characters, these aliens called the Caragol. And when we were introduced to them, there's 4 left. All of their species has been wiped out, apparently. And what they want is revenge against the people who wiped them out. And then they get a whole arc where, they get revenge over the course of their books, and, surprises happen. So it's not hard to give the readers knowledge of this is what these people want. And then there is that conflict of how do they get what they want. And then you can have things come up along the way like, I didn't know I wanted that too. And it just makes things more interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think that one of the knowing that I'm such a character centric reader, that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we had for the book, because in my opinion, plots are easy, the characters are hard, and by writing hard characters, by actually building them with depth and backstory and idiosyncrasies that are unique to that character, you create a character that people are going to, in their mind while they're reading this book, is not just a cardboard cutout of somebody doing action on the page. And so, we go into the Terra Nova series, and we know that this bad thing happened to Carson really early on in her career, but we don't know what it is. All the characters kind of allude to it, and they're like, isn't this kind of like this? And we don't want her here. And so there's a lot of angst with some of the other Pathfinders on they don't want her here. And so she's got to deal with those internal struggles in her own team, on top of trying to redeem herself for what she's already done. And so just knowing those little things about the characters, and even the the big bad triumvirate aliens, their wants and their desires, because we didn't want to create. One of the things that Richard told me when we started this book is he didn't want to do another Zaros. He didn't want to have just another huge, just completely evil, just wiping everything out for the sake of wiping it out, right? He wanted to have some motivations for these aliens, so we had to figure that out. And so we know what their motivations are, and slowly throughout the story, you'll get tidbits, and you'll see it start to develop, and you'll understand, hopefully, maybe not agree with, but understand their motivations and the motivations of all these other people that are in the story, which I think is a really cool aspect of Terra Nova.
The character of Kit Carson is a really interesting one. She's a very complex character. And was there any particular reason that you chose her as kind of the centerpiece of the story? And was there any motivation behind having her as a woman?
Part of it for being for Carson being a major character in the series is that, you know, the overarching lead is Ken Hale, and he's in the director's seat. And for story writing, it's really hard to get the big boss into the action, because it's like, why are you in a gunfight? You're supposed to be in charge. And, you know, for like in a military unit, it's not the brigade commander that's out there, you know, shooting the bad guys. It's that lieutenant and his soldiers who are in that action. So having the lower ranked character being a major part of the series that's how, you know, keep it a little bit more interesting. Otherwise, it's Ken Hale going to lots of meetings, and that's not real exciting for the reader. So,
speak for yourself.
I've been in the military. I've been to plenty of meetings, and there's a reason I write about battles. So, but as for Kit Carson being a female, it felt right. And, you know, there was no, I mean, I never had like, it's a girl power thing. No, it's just, with this military, because people have these augmented suits where there's, you know, on the battlefield, there's really no physiological difference between men and women so much as what they can do in the battlefield. So I thought, okay, let's have Kit Carson here. It makes things more interesting, I thought.
What about you, Josh? Was there any challenge in writing her and that character?
Well, and it's funny because the Carson we originally cast him as a man, and we went through talking about how we're gonna, you know, develop these characters, and I think it was you, Richard, that came and said, "What if we make her a girl? How does that change the story?" And I immediately liked the idea because it's different. It's different from his other books. And the other reason that we wanted to create all these different characters instead of just bringing over carry-ons from the Ember War is I wanted to be able to write these characters and know them 100%. Whereas I could read all of Richard's books, but even reading all of Richard's books, which I have, I don't know his characters as well as he knows his characters. So when I start to write a character, I want to be able to know what they're doing and how they're thinking about things. So like when I write Ken Hale, when I write his parts, I'll write them the way I think Richard wants him. But when Richard gets it, he'll see something that he is, nope, that's not Ken. He'll change that. Great, because that's his character. And even going back and looking at the final drafts, most of the character idiosyncrasies that you see with the ones that I create are still there, because it's simply to that character. But with Carson, we wanted to create a strong character who definitely had flaws, but has flaws on many different levels. And that, you know, one of her flaws is that she wants to prove herself. That is her biggest desire, is to prove herself to Ken Hale. And so sometimes she does things over the top that are probably she wouldn't do if she wasn't trying to impress Hale so much. the other things is she's still got to fight with the demons of her past and what happened in her earlier on her career. And so she's kind of fighting it from both ends, but then she's also got to be the leader for this team, because now they're the only ones that can do what they need to get done. And that's the other thing I like about the series, is that it's like being on a deserted island and trying to decide which book you want to bring with you, right? Because there's no help from Earth. The way that we set this up, the way that Richard's math works, and Handwavium says that they can only get there every 40, 60, 100 years or whatever we decide, right? So they go to Terra Nova, they're there. There's no going back to Earth. There's no help coming for them. And so when they get there and they find that the colony's empty and they don't know what's going on, Carson's team is literally the only people that can do something about it. And so now they have to come together and work through their differences and work over the challenges that they have as a team, and Carson has as a leader to go through it. I think that gives a lot to the story. I think the readers actually like that a lot. We can see a lot of the reviews already that have come in that says these characters are very well presented.
And with Carson's history and the baggage she brings, you've got a real opportunity for a redemption story of sorts, and everybody loves a great redemption story.
Yeah.
So how many books are planned for the series?
I think we're going to do at least 5, but if people still enjoy the series, and if Scott keeps wanting to suffer through my outlines, I don't see any reason why we won't do more.
Awesome. How often are you planning to publish?
At least, for the sake of algorithms and keeping fresh in readers' minds, at least once every 90 days. That's the goal. Yep.
We, I think once we got our processes down, I got Terra Nova, the first one turned in. It took us a little bit to work through that because we weren't kind of sure on how we wanted to present the final product. Once we nailed that and we got it out, got the outline for book 2. I think I've had the outline for book 2 for 12 days, I think.
That sounds right.
And so I've got a running spreadsheet that tells me how many days I have left, and I'm actually ahead of schedule. But I'm aiming to have the first draft done the middle of January, so I can get everything to Richard, and he can go through it, make whatever he needs to make, send it to me if he needs more or really significant changes to something that I just haven't seen, and then ship it off to the editor, and hopefully in February. That's the February we're aiming. We don't have a specific date yet, but February is what we're looking at to publish book 2.
Nice. I can't wait to see the covers that are coming up. This one, the first one, has a real kind of John Carter feel for it to me, and it really makes me think of kind of golden era sci-fi.
I really wish I could have seen Josh's face when I said, "No, it's a mountain with a screaming face and then 2 faces attached to that." and I would love to have seen I wonder if Josh was like, "What the hell?" But
what's funny is when he describes that scene in the outline, I get to that scene in the book, and I'm writing it, and I stop and I visualize in my head, okay, I got it. I write it down, and then I don't know, maybe 2 days later, and I'm past that scene already. I'm at a different point in the manuscript, and then like 2 or 3 days later, he sends me the rough drafts for the cover, and I look at it, and I'm like, "Yep, that's not at all what I saw. I need to go back and redo the scene." So I had to go back and change the description in my narrative, because but I really like the cover. When he showed it to me, I was like, "Oh man, yeah, that's spot on."
Yeah,
love it.
There's one page on Facebook where they get classic covers and they change the titles around.
Right.
And I'm trying to remember what it is, but I really hope they get a hold of that cover and they just call it Mountain Nope.
Oh man. Guys, I love what y'all are doing. Terra Nova is spectacular. I highly recommend everybody to go grab a copy of it right now. You can read it for free with Kindle Unlimited, or it's $3.99 to just buy it outright. And I think you guys have paperbacks available also, don't you?
That's correct.
Yeah, this is going to be a collectible series. Everybody go out and grab a copy and look for them about every 90 days. Josh and Richard, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
The dawn caressed Sleepy Hollow, like a father's hand on the forehead of a newborn. A white Christmas, the first in several years. Kate loved the snow, always had. She loved sledding and snowmen and snowball fights. Every year, Kate's father gave her a special Christmas reading of some object of her choice, telling her all the wonderful things in store, keeping anything bad to himself. For example, he read her saddle and predicted that she and Gunsmoke would win the dressage championship that summer, and they ultimately did. Possibly the very idea that she could win had made Kate confident enough to try for it. Seeing the future did that to a person. The downside to a prophetic gift was that seers could overdose on confidence. Kate knew that she drove and rode and lived too recklessly. But why not? She knew she would be fine. Kate had always enjoyed her father's annual Christmas readings. They were like letters sent back by time travelers. Usher never read Kate herself, though. That would be an event. That would be a rite of passage. Father would read daughter, and she would become dark to him at last. Some seeing families don't make a ritual of such things. The Ushers did. Perhaps the reading would occur on the day she graduated high school, or on the day she got engaged, or the day she got married. Maybe he would save the reading for his deathbed, to give himself a look at all the years he would miss. Kate and her father sat cross-legged by the tree, facing each other like two shamans. "Your turn," said Usher, passing her a bulky gift. "I give up. You win." "No quitting." "You're 4 for 4 and I'm at 0. I don't have a chance."
"Play it out."
"Fine." Kate pressed her palms to the wrapping. She closed her eyes, but nothing came. "A sweater," she mumbled.
"A sweater? You're not even trying."
"A yellow sweater with a V-neck," said Kate. Her father shook his head, frowning at her. She sighed and ripped the gift open. Leather boots.
"Is everything okay?" Usher said. "You should be stronger, not weaker."
"I'm tired, is all."
"After a run-in with the horseman? Your gift should have doubled."
"It's your turn." She handed him a small package. His hand closed on it.
"Wristwatch," he said immediately. "Vintage. Art Deco. Brown strap. Thank you, baby."
He kissed her cheek. "Open it, at least." He opened the box and held the watch to the fire, admiring it.
"One more present."
"I'm done. You win. Game, set, and match." He drew her to the window. In the driveway sat a red Ferrari with a big white bow. He kissed her cheek.
"Nothing's too good for my little girl."
Kate took the keys from him. "And what if I were a normal? Would I still be your little girl?" Her father laughed.
"Of course you would. But you wouldn't be an usher."